I remember that night like it happened yesterday. It was supposed to be just a regular drive. One of those long stretches on the highway when the world is asleep, and all you hear is the hum of your car's engine. It was around 2 a.m., and I had been driving for hours. My eyes were starting to blur, and I knew I needed a break, just a quick stop to refuel and maybe grab a cup of. I spotted a gas station up ahead. A small, run-down place, flickering lights above the pumps and a neon, open 24 hours, sign that buzzed in the silence. It looked empty, not a single car in sight. But at that time of night, I wasn't expecting a crowd. So, I pulled in and parked my car next to one of the pumps. The place was eerie, almost like it was frozen in time. It had this vibe, you know? Like it had seen better days, and tonight it just felt off. As I stepped out of the car, the chill of the night hit me. It was colder than I expected, and the silence. It was so quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I started fueling up, but I couldn't shake this weird feeling. You know that sensation when you just know you're not alone? Like someone's eyes are on you. I tried to brush it off as paranoia. I mean, it was late, and my mind was probably playing tricks on me. But then, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. My head snapped to the side, and I swear I saw something. Just a shadow, moving past the edge of the station, near the dumpsters in the dark. I stood there for a second, just staring, trying to convince myself it was just a stray cat or maybe a plastic bag caught in the wind. But there was no wind, and the shadow, it felt too human. My heart started pounding a little harder. I kept telling myself to stay calm, finish fueling, and get back in the car. But every second felt like an eternity, and that nagging feeling of being watched only got stronger. I couldn't see anyone, but I knew. Someone was there, lurking just beyond the edge of the lights. I tried to keep it together. I finished fueling up as quickly as I could, my hands shaking a bit as I put the nozzle back. I just wanted to get out of there. So, I jumped into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and let out a deep breath. But that relief, it didn't last long. I glanced up at the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. A face, pale, wide eyes staring right back at me from the back seat. My heart stopped. It was like every muscle in my body froze up, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. All I could do was stare, my mind racing with panic. I thought I saw, I don't know, but it felt like a person sitting right there behind me. I spun around in my seat, ready to face whatever it was. But nothing. The back seat was empty, completely empty. My mind was going crazy, trying to make sense of what just happened. Was I hallucinating? I checked the mirror again, nothing. No face, no eyes staring back. Just the dark, empty seats. But that didn't calm me down. If anything, it made it worse because now I couldn't explain it. All I knew was that something was wrong, and I needed to get out of that place fast. I fumbled with my keys, trying to get the car started. My hands were shaking so bad, it felt like I could barely hold on to them. Finally, I got the engine running and I threw the car into drive. But I couldn't just leave. I needed to tell someone what just happened, see if they knew anything about whatever that was. So, I drove right up to the front of the store, parking as close to the door as I could. I rushed inside, and the moment I stepped into that harsh, fluorescent light, it felt like I was in a different world. The guy behind the counter was just standing there, staring at me with this blank expression, like he was waiting for me to say something. I blurted out everything, telling him what I thought I saw, how there was this face in my back seat. But the way he looked at me, it made my skin crawl. He didn't seem surprised, not even a little. He just nodded like he'd heard this all before. And then he said something that sent a chill down my spine. "You need to leave. Now, this place. It's not safe at night." I pushed for more, asked him what he meant, who I saw. But he just shook his head and kept repeating it. "Go. Just go." His voice was flat, almost robotic, but there was this look in his eyes, fear. He looked more scared than I felt. I didn't wait around for more explanations. If this guy was that freaked out, I wasn't going to stick around to find out why. I bolted out of the store, the cold night air hitting me like a slap to the face. My only thought was to get away as fast as possible. I jumped back into the car, locked the doors, and floored it out of that gas station. My heart was racing, my eyes darting to the mirrors, expecting to see that face again, or worse, someone following me. As I sped down the highway, the adrenaline was pumping so hard that I could barely keep my grip on the steering wheel. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that pale face pop up again. But every time I looked, it was just darkness, an empty road behind me. But somehow that didn't make me feel any better. It was like I was being chased by something invisible, something I couldn't see, but could feel closing in. After what felt like forever, I finally reached a more populated area, and I pulled over to the side of a well-lit street, trying to catch my breath. I sat there, engine running, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white, just staring into the mirror, waiting. But there was nothing, no one, just the empty, quiet back seat. Eventually, I drove to the nearest motel, locked myself in the room, and spent the rest of the night with all the lights on, trying to make sense of what happened. And in the morning, I thought about going back, maybe asking that attendant what he knew, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't want to know. To this day, I still have no idea what I saw that night. Maybe it was a trick of the light, maybe I was just tired, or maybe there really was someone back there with me. But one thing's for sure, I'll never stop at a gas station in the middle of nowhere again. Not ever. It was supposed to be a quick stop, nothing more. I was driving alone on this long, empty stretch of highway, trying to make it to the next town before dawn. My eyes were getting heavy, and I knew I needed a break, just to stretch my legs, grab a drink, maybe refuel. So, when I saw this small gas station off to the side, glowing under those bright fluorescent lights, I figured it was the perfect place. The place was quiet, almost too quiet for my liking, but what do you expect at 3 a.m. in the middle of nowhere? As I pulled in, I noticed that the lot was nearly empty, except for one old, rusty car parked off to the side. It looked like it had been sitting there for a while, windows fogged up, dust on the hood. There wasn't any movement inside, and for a second, I thought maybe it was abandoned. But I didn't pay much attention to it. I parked near the pump, got out and started fueling up. The cold air hit me, and I shivered, trying to shake off that feeling of loneliness that comes with being out in the middle of nowhere by yourself. It was just me, my car, and the buzzing lights of this quiet, empty gas station, or so I thought. As I stood there fueling up, that silence started to get to me. It wasn't just quiet, it was like the world had gone completely still, and I felt this strange urge to keep looking over my shoulder. That's when I saw him. He came out of nowhere, just appearing from the shadows around the side of the gas station. A man, maybe in his late 40s, scruffy beard, wearing an old, tattered jacket. He moved slowly, almost like he was limping. I don't know how I missed him before, but now he was right there, walking toward me. "Hey," he called out, his voice low and kind of raspy, like he hadn't spoken in days. "You, heading into town?" The way he spoke, it didn't sit right with me. There was something unsettling about it, like he was trying too hard to sound normal, like he was mimicking what a regular person should sound like. He asked me if I could give him a ride, said he was trying to get to the next town over, just a few miles up the road. And that's when I really looked at him. His eyes, they were too wide, too intense, like he hadn't slept in days. I felt this chill run down my spine. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to say no, but I couldn't find my voice. I managed to mumble something about not going in that direction, trying to brush him off without making him angry. He just stood there, staring at me with those wide, unblinking eyes. And in that moment, I couldn't tell if he was desperate or dangerous. But either way, I knew I needed to get out of there, fast. I tried to keep my cool, acting like everything was fine. I finished pumping the gas as quickly as I could, not wanting to make any sudden movements. But that guy, he didn't move an inch. He just kept watching me, those eyes following my every move, like he was waiting for me to slip up. So I figured the safest thing to do was to go inside the store, act like I needed to pay for the gas, and maybe ask the attendant if they knew anything about this guy. As I walked away, I could still feel his eyes boring into the back of my head, but I didn't dare look back. When I stepped into the store, the bell above the door rang, but there was no one at the counter. The lights were harsh, buzzing loudly, and the shelves were half empty, like they hadn't been stocked in weeks. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" But there was no answer. Felt like the whole place was abandoned. I moved closer to the counter, looking for any sign of the attendant, and that's when I noticed the door to the back room was slightly ajar. I pushed it open just a bit and called out again, but still, nothing. That's when I saw it on the floor, a few droplets of something dark, red. It didn't take a genius to know what it was. My pulse started racing, and my thoughts were going a mile a minute. What happened here? And where was everyone? I didn't know what to do, whether to get back to my car and drive or stay and find out what was going on. But one thing was clear. Whatever was happening here, it was bad, and I was right in the middle of it. My hands were trembling as I backed away from the door, trying to make as little noise as possible. I didn't know where the attendant was or what those droplets on the floor meant, but I knew I couldn't stick around to find out. I glanced out the window toward my car, and that's when I saw it. The man with the scruffy beard, now standing right next to my car, his face inches from my passenger window. I felt this wave of panic wash over me. My mind was screaming to run, but my body felt like it was glued to the spot. And then, like he sensed I was watching him, he turned his head slowly, his eyes locking onto mine through the store window. A smile spread across his face, and it wasn't friendly. It was slow, deliberate, like he knew something. In that split second, I knew I had to make a choice, either face him or make a break for it. I bolted for the door, flinging it open and sprinting toward my car. I could hear him shouting behind me, his footsteps heavy on the concrete as he ran after me. I fumbled with my keys, trying to unlock the car door, my fingers slipping, my breath coming out in panicked gasps. Finally, I got the door open, threw myself inside, and slammed it shut. He reached the car just as I hit the lock button. He pounded on the window, his face inches away from mine, that smile twisted into a look of anger. He kept yelling, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. All I could see were his eyes, wild and desperate. I didn't stop driving for miles, my heart pounding in my chest, the road ahead a blur of headlights and darkness. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, convinced that at any moment I'd see the flash of that rusty car's headlights or, worse, that man sprinting impossibly fast behind me. But the road stayed empty, stretching out endlessly in front of me after what felt like an eternity, I reached the lights of a nearby town. My hands were still shaking as I pulled into a well-lit parking lot next to a diner, where a few trucks were parked and people were coming in and out. I felt some relief seeing other humans, life, normalcy. I parked the car, but even then, I couldn't calm down. I just sat there, gripping the wheel and staring out at nothing, trying to make. When I finally got out and went inside, the diner was warm and smelled like coffee and grilled food. A comforting break from the horror I just escaped. I went straight to the counter and asked to use their phone to call the police. The waitress looked concerned, seeing my pale face and shaking hands, and let me make the call. The officer on the line seemed calm, almost too calm, like they'd heard stories like this before. They asked me questions, what I saw, the gas station's location, the description of the man. I told them everything, but even as I spoke, I had this sinking feeling that they wouldn't find anything. And sure enough, when they went to investigate, they found nothing. No one at the gas station. No man. No rusty car. The store was completely empty, like no one had been there in ages. And that was it. I never got an answer to what happened that night or who that man was. But even now, whenever I pass by a gas station late at night, I feel that familiar chill down my spine. Because I know somewhere out there in the darkness he could be watching, waiting for the next person to stop. And I'm just glad it's not me again. It was supposed to be a simple drive. I was heading home from a long day, the kind that just drags on. You know? It was late, way later than I wanted it to be, and I was tired. So, when I saw the glowing lights of a gas station up ahead, I decided to stop, stretch my legs, and top off the tank. The place was a typical roadside station. Isolated, surrounded by nothing but empty fields and woods, with those bright overhead lights making everything look washed out. There was no one else around, which didn't surprise me at that hour. Except for one thing, a large, beat-up white truck parked a little further away from the pumps. It looked like it had been there a while, just sitting under the glow of one of the lights, and for some reason that image just unsettled me. I tried to ignore it. I pulled up to the pump, got out and started filling up my car, but my eyes kept drifting back to that truck. The windows were tinted so I couldn't see inside, and there was something unnerving about how it just sat there, silent and still, almost like it was watching. I told myself I was just being paranoid. After all, it was late and I was tired. But that truck, it felt out of place, like it didn't belong there, and neither did I. I tried to shake it off, focusing on fueling up and getting back on the road. But as I stood there, my back to the truck, I couldn't help but feel exposed, like someone was staring right through me. I forced myself to turn around, to prove to myself that it was just my imagination. But then, I saw him. The door of the white truck creaked open, and this man stepped out. He was tall, heavy-built, with a scruffy beard and wearing an old, dirty jacket. And he didn't move like someone casually stretching their legs. He was slow, deliberate, almost like he was testing how much attention he could draw without seeming obvious. He started walking toward the store, but his eyes were locked on me the entire time. Not a glance. Not like you do when you pass a stranger, but a deep, unsettling stare, like he was sizing me up, figuring out what to do next. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to get back in my car and drive away, but I was frozen, my hand gripping the gas pump. He reached the entrance to the store but didn't go inside. Instead, he just stood there, leaning against the door frame, still staring. And that's when he smiled. A slow, crooked smile that made my skin crawl. It was like he knew something I didn't, like he was daring me to come closer, to find out what he was hiding. And for some stupid reason, part of me thought that maybe he was just waiting to go inside. Maybe he just needed something from the store. But as I kept my eyes on him, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. He wasn't even looking at the store. He was looking straight at me, like I was the reason he got out of that truck. My heart was pounding in my chest, every beat telling me to get out of there. But I couldn't just leave yet. I needed to pay for the gas. And I sure as hell didn't want to go near that guy, so I decided to go inside and maybe get some help from the attendant. I kept my eyes on him the whole time, making my way around the pump and toward the door, hoping he would move away. But he didn't. He just stood there, still leaning against the frame, like he was waiting for me. When I got closer, he finally stepped aside, letting me through, but not before leaning in just a bit, close enough that I could smell the stale, sour scent of his breath. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. The way his eyes followed me as I moved past him was enough. I pushed open the door and rushed inside, the fluorescent lights blindingly bright compared to the darkness outside. But when I got in, it felt wrong. There was nobody behind the counter. No attendant, no sound of anyone moving around in the back. It was like the whole place was deserted. I walked up to the counter, calling out, "Hello? Anybody here?" But there was no response. The only noise was the faint hum of the refrigerators and the flickering buzz of the lights overhead. That's when I noticed something on the floor behind the counter. Footprints. Muddy, dark footprints leading to the back door of the store. My mouth went dry, and every nerve in my body was on edge. I didn't know if they belonged to the attendant or someone else, but either way, it was clear that whoever had made them wasn't here anymore. I stood there, feeling trapped between the emptiness of the store and the man waiting outside, and that's when I realized I wasn't alone. The silence inside the store was thick, almost suffocating. I kept my eyes on those footprints, leading to the back room, my mind racing with what could be back there. But then my instincts kicked in. I needed to get out. The sooner, the better. I spun around, ready to bolt back to my car. But when I looked through the glass door, my stomach dropped. The man from the truck wasn't standing by the entrance anymore. He was right up against my car, peering inside, cupping his hands to the glass like he was searching for something or someone. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out every other thought. I was stuck. There was no way I was going to confront him, but my car. It was my only way out. I tried to steady my breathing, hoping that maybe if I stayed hidden in the store for a few minutes, he'd leave. But as I crouched behind the counter, peeking just above the top, I saw him circle around to the driver's side, his hand reaching for the handle. He tugged on the door. It was locked, thank God. But he didn't stop. He kept pulling, yanking harder and harder, like he was trying to rip the door open. I had to do something. I darted toward the back room, hoping maybe there was another way out, a back door that led somewhere safe. But as soon as I got close, I heard the faintest sound coming from behind it, scratching, like nails dragging across the floor. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I didn't know what was worse, going back out there to face the man, or finding out what was behind that door. That's when I heard a loud, furious banging on the front glass, and I knew my time was running out. I had to make a choice, and fast. The banging on the glass got louder, each hit echoing like a drum in my chest. I didn't know what to do. Run back out there and try to make it to the car or see what was hiding behind that door. But I couldn't just sit there and wait for that guy to break through. I took a deep breath and decided I'd make a run for it. My hands were shaking as I dug in my pocket for my keys, praying I'd have the chance to get in the car before he could get to me. But just as I was about to make a break for it, the back door swung open on its own, creaking loudly, and I was hit by this overwhelming smell, rotten, metallic, like old blood and sweat. A figure stepped out, a man, pale, wild-eyed, his clothes covered in dark stains. He looked like he hadn't seen daylight in weeks, and his eyes, they were desperate, frantic, like an animal cornered. He didn't say a word, just stood there, blocking my only way out, and I realized with a sickening twist in my gut that whoever he was hiding back here for a reason. I had no choice. I bolted toward the front door, praying the glass would hold long enough for me to get out. The man from the truck was still banging, shouting now, a string of curses and threats that I couldn't make sense of, but I didn't care. I yanked open the door, squeezed past him, and ran to my car. Fumbling with my keys, I managed to unlock the door and throw myself inside, locking it behind me just as he lunged at the window. He pounded on the glass with everything he had, but I didn't stop to watch. I started the engine, slammed my foot on the gas, and tore out of that parking lot, the tires screeching as I sped down the road. In the rearview mirror, I saw both men standing there. The one from the truck, fists raised, screaming at me, and the other one, just standing, staring with those wide, empty eyes like he knew something I'd never understand. And as I drove off, heart racing and hands shaking, I realized that whatever was going on at that gas station, it wasn't just some random encounter. I escaped that night, but I never went back to find out what was really happening there. And I hope I never do.